Architect Divya Chakravarti. She completed her undergraduate studies from SRM University and she went on to pursue her master's in historic preservation and urbanism and study of the built environment from the University of California, Los Angeles. She went on to work for the Department of Planning and Preservation for the city of Pasadena, California. She also did a brief stint of work for Historic Scotland, Edinburgh, UK. She had also worked on conservation projects like Kalsa Mahal, Gokhale Hall in Chennai, and Marimalappa Educational Trust in Mysore. She is currently working as a director of Samrakshan Heritage Consultancy. She is also a co-founder of the Artisan Reprisal of Traditional Materials, Method and Technology. She goes on to conduct workshops to revive traditional and lost methods of construction.
Welcome to the UGC lecture series for Bachelors of Architecture. The subject we are discussing is environmental science. The topic we will be delving into is environmental pollution. In this lecture, we will be looking into soil pollution, the different methods used to control soil contamination, marine pollution and noise pollution. How do we go about controlling pollution or contamination of soil? Primarily reducing chemical fertilizers and use of pesticides. Recycling is another important way to reduce and control soil pollution. When we recycle paper, plastics and other materials, it basically reduces the volume of refuse in landfills, which is a major common problem of soil pollution. Reusing of materials, deforestation, the cutting down of trees causing erosion, pollution and loss of fertility in the topsoil. Planting trees or reforestation helps prevent soil erosion as well as pollution of the soil. Weeds soak up minerals in the soil. Reducing weed growth also helps in soil pollution. One of the more common methods of reducing weed growth is covering the soil with numerous layers of wet newspapers or a plastic sheet for several weeks before cultivation. This prevents light from reaching the weeds, which basically kills them. Designated pits should be used for dumping of soil waste. These wastes should then be treated chemically and biologically to make them less toxic and hazardous. So, reuse, recycle and reduce consumption, especially within our own homes. We need to segregate the waste, and things that can be decomposed can be put in a compost pit. Things which can be recycled like plastic and glass have to be put separately, and hazardous waste like computer parts, batteries, CDs, all that have to be collected separately. Treatment of soil pollution. The conventional methods of soil pollution are very time consuming and expensive as well. EPA officials excavate the soil to dispose it elsewhere, which is basically a band-aid for the problem, no doubt, but essential for toxic disasters in highly populated spaces. Soils can be aerated, heated up in a process called thermal remediation, contained with pavement or caps, extracted with an active electromechanical system, or propagating the soil with microbes that will digest organic pollutants. A basic case study of soil pollution. Love Canal is perhaps the most important and famous case study of soil pollution. In the snowy winter of '76, chemical waste began to seep above ground in school playgrounds and communities in Niagara Falls, New York. The area suffered high incidence of stillborn births, miscarriages and birth defects as well. Officials soon realized that there are nearly 400 toxic substances in the water, air as well as soil, and many of these were found to be cancerous. As it turns out, the area had been used as a chemical dumping ground for more than 22,000 tons of toxic waste at the turn of the century, when no one was actually aware of the hazardous impacts that it could have decades later. That is what is very important about heavy metal poisoning. The effect needn't be immediate, and it needn't be immediate in the time frame, nor to the people living above the site. It could be felt many years later as well as in a different place completely. Another important or rather infamous case of soil pollution happened in Chernobyl, a small town in Russia. A nuclear power plant exploded in April of 1986, which caused a 7-fold increase in birth defects, a marked increase in cancer that was passed on to future generations as well, livestock death, mutation and tainted agriculture. It is estimated that 40% of Chernobyl is still uninhabitable due to radiation contamination, that is 10 times the normal level in some places that we are talking about today. So, it is nearly 30 years later that the effects are still felt. At our very own within our country, a soil pollution site along Kalwa Bridge at Thane Creek in Maharashtra, soil pollution has been reported along the wetland of Thane Creek due to the depositions by Thane Belapur Industrial Complex in South Bombay. Heavy metal pollution, physiochemical characteristics is detected, pH level, bulk density, alkalinity, chlorinity is recorded high during dry season. This is the Kalwa Bridge at Thane Creek. You can see both solid, that is soil, as well as the water under the bridge is getting contaminated severely. Now, if you look at the cycle of reaction, you have wet waste that decomposes and releases bad odor. Then you have poisonous gas leaks like methane, CH-4. Then you have depletion of mangroves. Then that attracts insects, rats and flies that spread a lot of diseases that lead to a certain amount of problems. Then the other problems include, this affects plant and animal life. Then stagnant water in rains leads to breeding ground of many mosquitoes, which again lead to a series of diseases. Then you have pollution causing damage to road and property and basic bad looks that is there, and that leads to actual economic deterioration because investments especially from foreign sector reduces when the area does not look hygienic, is prone to diseases. And major thing is collection of plastics and plastic issues. Other impacts you have is waste workers are severely affected, that is corporation workers. Hospital and industrial waste create major health hazards. Decrease in oxygen levels causing severe breathing problems. Mosquitoes can carry life-threatening diseases. Birds, small animals die after ingesting toxic waste. Preventive measures, what can be done? At household level, proper segregation of waste is very important. Plastics should be not used, completely avoided is better. You need to wheel cleaning facility, in the sense you need to segregate what is there, and at every dumping ground the segregation should happen before it is put in a landfill. Proper method of waste disposal depending on what is the waste. Everything cannot be burnt. If batteries are burnt, it leads to severe problems. If CDs and other computer parts are burnt, it leads to series of other problems. So, the waste has to be segregated and dealt with its characteristics. Soil pollution at Deonar dumping ground. This is the largest and oldest dumping ground in Mumbai. It is extending over 132 hectares. It receives around 5,500 metric tons of garbage, 600 metric tons of silts and 25 tons of biomedical waste every day. That amount of garbage cannot be processed in one facility. So, the main problem is having more number of points at every locality and then brought down to a dumping ground, so the waste can be segregated before it is dumped. Soil pollution due to hazardous substances, this is mainly from hospitals, this is just plastic bags from different neighborhood, agricultural waste, and chemical and biological properties from hospital waste is very crucial, because you end up having birds coming there, small dogs, rats, all of these go to these dumping grounds to get their food, and if these hazardous wastes affect them, they bring it to the humans and other neighborhoods around, which will again affect the entire food chain and human ecological system. Effect of human health, hazard 90% of soil pollution and health on human beings which are living on it. Example, residents of Chembur, Govandi, Mankund and Shivaji Nagar. Smoke is affecting asthma patients, and the number of asthma patients and bronchitis patients are also steadily increasing. Soil pollution at Juhu at Maharashtra. Juhu is actually considered an affluent neighborhood of West Mumbai. Most of celebrities live here. It is also home to a significant portion of Mumbai's business elite. Recently, it has been noticed that Juhu has become a place for disposal of waste. All sorts of waste are dumped here. For example, plastic bags, bottles, paper plates, glass bottles, etc. This kind of garbage disposal has increased the number of mosquitoes and other insects which cause malaria, dengue. This can also be fatal in the longer run, especially when you have poorer people and as well as slums residing nearby. The polluted soil stops the proper growth of plants and trees in a particular area, which then leads to stunted growth or lack of trees. That leads to erosion of topsoil when rain happens, and it creates an entire vicious circle. This is the polluted soil which leads to various problems. This is considered parts of Juhu beach. This is a cleanup session which is held by Domino's regularly over there, and communities need to actively participate to do such things. The dirt that is beyond one's ability to get wiped out completely. No human being can clean this level of dirt when it's collected like an entire layer of soil. Preventive measures. The government of India should implement certain laws to be followed very strictly. We can create awareness by holding marathons, beach cleanups, and also by raising posters. We need to reduce the use of plastics, find out alternate materials that are suitable that can replace plastics. Vendors can keep dustbins right outside their shops for waste to be discarded. Stop waiting for things to happen. We need to go out and do it. So, community approach is most important when it comes to a cleanup process. Government can take care of the legislative level and the law and order level of it, but when it comes to working at a grassroots level, it's the community and people are part of the society that can start with it. So, the first thing we need to go about treatment of soil pollution. Now, why we have studied what can be done to prevent contamination. But now that we know our soil is contaminated, how can it be treated? New processes are being developed to combat this problem in a natural, less laborious as well as less expensive way. You need to study plants that grow naturally in these toxic mines. So, scientist CH-10 discovered that certain plants actually love to consume heavy metals like arsenic, bronze, lead, zinc, cobalt and cadmium. These contaminants can then be retrieved from the plant's leaves and be used in industrial materials. This safe and effective method is not perfect, but it's somewhere we can actually start the process. Naturally, prevention is better and is considered the best cure for soil pollution. Most states have enacted tougher legislations to stop illegal dumping. For instance, one can expect 5 years in jail and a fine of $100,000 for soil pollution in the state of Texas in United States. Educating consumers about dangers of littering while encouraging recycling programs is a good way to ensure everyone does their part to keep debris where it belongs. Consumers can also make a concentrated and effort to buy organic foods to demand that chemical pesticides should not be used on their foods. Moving on to marine pollution. What exactly is marine pollution? Marine pollution includes a range of threats including from land-based sources, oil spills, untreated sewage, heavy siltation or eutrophication, that is nutrient enrichment, invasive species, persistent organic pollutants or POPs, heavy metals from mine tailings and other sources, acidification, radioactive substances, marine litter, overfishing and destruction of coastal and marine habitats. Marine pollution, if you look at it, land-based discharge takes a whopping 44%, oil exploration and production only 1%, dumping of waste about 10%, maritime transport, that is leaks from ships, boats and all of that, is about 12%, and atmospheric inputs is the next big chunk at 33%. If you look at health of marine life, Coral reefs are at risk from human activities. In the Pacific, if you look at it, it's at high or very high risk. Then you have Middle East is a little better off. Caribbean, Indian Ocean and Southeast Asia are following right behind. So when you look at coral reefs, that is like a testing theory, how polluted is a particular marine body by studying the different aquatic life within that particular marine body. Reefs are actually classified as low risk and not considered in imminent danger, and that is why this is used as a control mechanism. Causes of marine pollution. Most sources of marine pollution are land based. The pollution often comes from non-point sources such as agricultural runoff and wind blown debris. Ways of pollutant inputs. There are 5 main ways in which inputs of pollution happen into the ocean. Number 1 is direct discharge of waste into the oceans, runoff water due to rain, ship pollution, atmospheric pollution and deep sea mining. If you look at potentially toxic chemicals actually adhere to tiny particles which are then taken up by plankton and benzoic animals, and most of these are either deposited or become filter feeders. In this way, the toxins are concentrated upward within ocean food chains. Many particles combine chemically in a manner highly depletive of oxygen, causing estuaries to actually become anoxic, that is where oxygen levels become pretty much negligent. This is direct discharge from factories or any industries. Pollutants enter rivers and then therefore the sea directly from urban sewerage and industrial waste discharges, sometimes either in the form of hazardous as well as toxic waste. Inland mining for copper, gold, etc. is another main source of marine pollution. Most of the pollution is simply soil which ends up in the rivers flowing into the sea. Some mineral discharge in the course of mining can cause problems such as copper, which is a common industrial pollutant which can interfere with the life, history and development of coral polyps. Mining has a poor environmental track record. So, mining is, we've seen, becomes a source of pollution in different sources, right from water, soil, air, everything. But it has become an intrinsic part of our life and economics as well, where a country entirely depends on mining for its GDP to be sustainable. Pollution from ships. Ships can pollute waterways and oceans in many ways. Oil spills can have devastating effects while being toxic to marine life. Polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, that is PAH, the components in crude oil are very difficult to clean up and may last for years in the sediment and marine environment. The discharge of cargo residues from bulk carriers can pollute ports, waterways and oceans. In many instances, vessels intentionally discharge illegal waste despite foreign and domestic regulations prohibiting such actions. Ships create noise pollution that disturb natural wildlife, and water from ballast tanks can spread harmful algae and other invasive species. Invasive species can take over once occupied areas, facilitate the spread of new diseases, introduce new genetic material, alter underwater seascapes and jeopardize the ability of native species to obtain food. So, a cargo, this is an image of a cargo ship that pumps ballast water over the side. This ballast water is collected from a place elsewhere and it is released in an entirely different place. So, along with this water comes algae, bacteria, other organic and inorganic matter that will alter the characteristics of the location it is being poured into, affecting not only the life that it is carrying, but also it will jeopardize the native species that are currently there in the ocean or sea the ship is travelling in. Surface runoff from farming, like we have discussed, is one of the major causes, because this has both urban runoff as well as runoff from construction of roads, buildings, ports, channels, harbours, and all of this can carry soil and particles laden with carbon, nitrogen, phosphorus and any other such minerals. So, this nutrient rich water then causes fresh algae and phytoplankton to thrive in coastal areas, which is known as algal blooms, which then has a potential to create hypoxic conditions using all available oxygen, altering the level of dissolved oxygen as well as the amount of dissolved oxygen that is going to be available to thriving aquatic life. Polluted runoff from roads and highways can be a significant source of water pollution in coastal areas. About 75% of toxic chemicals that flow into Puget Sound are carried by storm water that runs off paved roads and driveways, rooftops, yards and other developed land. Atmospheric pollution. Wind-blown dust, debris including plastic bags are blown seaward from landfills and other areas. Dust from the Sahara moves into the Caribbean and Florida during the warm season. So that's how far dust particles can actually come. Since 1970, dust outbreaks have worsened due to the periods of drought in Africa, and drought is mainly because of the loss of topsoil. Because of loss of topsoil, no plants can grow, and because no plants are growing, the topsoil gets flown away and blown away by wind, and it is a cyclic reaction that occurs. The USGS links dust events to a decline in the health of coral reefs across both Caribbean as well as Florida. So dust events in Africa actually have effects in the Caribbean as well as in Florida as well. Climate change is raising ocean temperatures and raising levels of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. These rising levels of carbon dioxide are acidifying the oceans, creating imbalance in salt content, pH balance, levels of alkalinity and acidity. Deep sea mining. Ocean mining sites are usually around in large areas of polymetallic nodules or active and extract hypothermal vents at around 1400 to 3700 meters below the ocean surface. One might wonder how can it actually affect the level of aquatic life, but that also has serious impacts because mining done anywhere causes some amount of pollution, and when severe huge mechanisms, huge pumps and drilling machines are used at that level, at that pressure, these deposits and parts of the basic ocean floor get disrupted. This disrupts the habitat of many local organisms, possibly depending on the type of mining and location, causing not only temporary disturbances but permanent disturbances and change in biodiversity. Near bottom plumes occur when tailings are pumped back into the mining site. Surface plumes cause a more serious problem. Depending on the size of the particles and water currents, the plumes could spread over vast areas. Aside from direct impact of mining, the area leakage, spills and corrosion would alter the mining area's chemical makeup. Human impacts on marine environments. Eutrophication. This is basically an increase in chemical nutrients, typically compounds containing nitrogen or phosphorus in a particular ecosystem. It can actually result in the increase in the ecosystem's primary productive, that is excessive plant growth or decay, and further effects including lack of oxygen. The biggest culprit are rivers that empty into the ocean, and with it many chemicals used as fertilizers in agriculture as well as waste from livestock and human life. An excess of oxygen depleting chemicals in water can lead to hypoxia and the creation of a dead zone. Dead zone is basically where you will see maybe a large water body with no thriving life because dissolved oxygen has become negligent. Acidification. The oceans are normally a natural carbon sink, absorbing carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. Structures made of calcium carbonate may become vulnerable to dissolution, affecting corals and the ability of shellfish to form shells. Oceans and coastal ecosystems have removed about 25% of the carbon dioxide emitted by human activities between 2000 and 2007, and about half the anthropogenic carbon dioxide has been released in the start of the Industrial Revolution. So you can see the change in that. Since the advent of Industrial Revolution and then since the turn of the century, how things have completely changed. You can see the level of turbidity that is completely changed, the degradation of coral reefs, as well as the quality of the corals as well. Plastic debris. 80% of marine debris is plastic, which is a component that has rapidly been accumulating since the end of World War II. Discarded plastic bags, six-pack rings, and other forms of plastic waste which finish up in the ocean present dangers to fisheries as well as wildlife. Aquatic life can be threatened to entanglement, suffocation, as well as ingestion. Fishing nets, usually made of plastic, can either be left or lost in the ocean by fishermen. Plastic debris can also tend to accumulate at the center of the ocean. In particular, the Great Pacific Garbage Patch has a high level of plastic particulates suspended in the upper water column. In samples taken in 1999, the mass of plastic exceeded that of zooplankton, that is the dominant animal life in the area, by a factor of 6. So, plastic debris is actually exceeding the animal life in the particular water body. Midway atoll, in common with all Hawaiian islands, receives substantial amounts of debris from garbage patch. 90% plastic. This debris accumulates on beaches of Midway, where it becomes a hazard to bird population on the island. Other toxins, apart from plastics, there are several other problems that there with toxins that do not disintegrate rapidly in the marine environment. Examples of certain persistent toxins are PCBs, DDT, pesticides, dioxins, phenols, and radioactive wastes. Heavy metals are metallic chemical elements that have a relatively high density and are toxic or poisonous at low concentrations also. So, examples are mercury, lead, nickel, arsenic, and cadmium. Such toxins can accumulate in the tissues of many species of aquatic life in a process called bioaccumulation. They are also known to accumulate in benthic environments such as estuaries, bay muds, a geological record of human activities of the last century. Noise pollution. Marine life can actually be susceptible to noise or sound pollution from sources such as passing ships, oil exploration, seismic surveys, and naval low frequency active sonar. Sound travels more rapidly over larger distances in the sea than in the atmosphere. Marine animals such as crustaceans often have weak eyesight and live in a world largely defined by acoustic information. This applies to many deep sea fish who live in a world of darkness, where sunlight actually does not permeate to that level. Between 1950 and 1975, ambient noise in the ocean increased by about 10 decibels, and that is a 10-fold increase. Noise also makes species communicate louder, which is called lumbar vocal responses. Mitigation. Either the human population is reduced, or way is found to reduce the ecological footprint left behind by average human beings. The second way is for humans individually to pollute less. That requires social as well as political will. The most important strategy for reducing marine pollution is education, awareness, research, and dissemination. Solutions to marine pollution. Marine pollution is a part of the problem of too much pollution by humans in general. There are only two ways to remedy this. Either the human population is reduced or the ecological footprint has to be reduced. Obviously the first way is easier said than done. There is no way we can go about reducing the number of people now, but we can definitely reduce individual ecological footprint, our carbon footprint. If that is not done, then ecosystems will falter and cease to support us. How do we go about protecting marine life? We need to protect it from oil pollution, from garbage pollution, from accidental loss or discharge of fishing gear. Plan to reduce and store your garbage. garbage waste management on board, especially in ships and boats, and shore facilities have to be improved. At the end of this lecture, we have looked into soil pollution, methods to control soil contamination, marine pollution, causes and effects of marine pollution. At the end of this lecture, we should be able to answer the following questions. How can soil pollution be reduced? With the help of a case study, explain how soil pollution can affect the ecological balance. What is marine pollution? Discuss the major causes of marine pollution. That brings us to the end of this lecture. Thank you.